thank you both of you so much, Saida and Rashida, for your powerful speech. I mean, talks this last hour. I would like to introduce two other powerful ladies who are going to speak the last hour of our session today. That's well, it will be about, the topic will be building our future on the shoulders of our fathers and mothers. And we have two wonderful ladies who will be speaking about it. That's Debbie. Debbie, welcome. I can see you. And yes. Ilyasah, do I speak your name correctly, Ilyasah? Okay.
Unmute yourself.
Yeah, wonderful. Yes. And I would like to hand over this conversation to both of you. And I really, really look after your talk this coming hour. Thank you.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Ramadan Mubarak. I hope you are all doing well and having a great time with your family during this season. Alhamdulillah, I think Ramadan coming during the time of coronavirus is actually a blessing to help us reconnect and rejuvenate and make us really much more grateful for all the things that we have, and that is our families and our health. I'm really delighted to actually have this opportunity to have a conversation with Ilyasah Shabazz, a dear friend who I've known for the last 12 years in New York City, a powerhouse doing really amazing stuff. And so before we kick off our session, it's imperative that I actually read her bio to just give people an opportunity to know who she is and what she's doing. And though that she is a leader in her own right, you know, standing on the shoulders of two incredible parents, she has also forged a reputation for herself that is one that makes all of us as American Muslims very proud. So Ilyasah Shabazz is an award-winning author, organizer, speaker, and professor. She oversees the Malcolm X and Dr. Betty Shabazz Memorial Educational Center, a site dedicated to preserving the legacy of her parents while addressing ongoing injustices. In this capacity, she has received praise from prominent international figures like President Obama, who acknowledged her work preserving her father's proud legacy by working to secure equality in our time and for generations to come. Ilyasah is often called to participate in international humanitarian delegations. She served as a member of the U.S. delegation that accompanied President Bill Clinton to South Africa to commemorate election of President Nelson Mandela and the education and economic development initiatives. She was also a member of the U.S. Interfaith Leadership Delegation to Mali, West Africa, with Malaria No More. In her work, Professor Ilyasah Shabazz promotes higher education for at-risk youth and interfaith dialogues to build bridges between cultures for young leaders of the world. Ilyasah is a proud role model and advocate for youth and women and girl empowerment. Her life work is devoted to helping others find inner strength and purpose. While she is frequently asked to speak about the legacy of Malcolm X, she shares that it is her mother, Dr. Betty Shabazz's wisdom, courage, and compassion that guide her. Professor Shabazz is an adjunct professor at John Jay Criminal Justice in New York City, where she emphasizes empowerment and inclusion in her teaching. With her father's legacy in mind, she stresses the importance of exploring and fostering one's identity. Ilyasah is currently working on her 5th book with Macmillan Publisher Group. The Awakening of Malcolm X will be released in February 2021. So Ilyasah, welcome to the Concordia Forum. I'm so delighted to introduce you to this incredible network of people who are doing incredible work all over the world. You are right now speaking to a platform that truly is global. Welcome, and just wanted to open up with you with a few words of tell us what does it mean? What are those values that help guide you in the work that you do that have been bestowed on you by your parents?
Well, you know, I really do often say that it is my mother, who gave me all of my, she inspired me tremendously. You know, just looking at her and knowing that as a young woman, the challenges that she faced as the wife of Malcolm X, and in spite of having her babies and in spite of seeing her husband gunned down in front of her, she continued, you know, with a great sense of inspiration and empowerment for many women, for many mothers, for people in general. And she safeguarded her husband's legacy for the benefit of future generations. So, you know, for as long as I can remember, my mother always said, Ilyasah, just as one must drink water, one must give back. And I wish I could have a sip of water right now, but I'm grateful because of the values, you know, and the discipline that she instilled in me and my 5 sisters for as long as I can remember.
Awesome.
So, you know, it's one of the reasons why I teach, you know, one of the reasons, you know, I'm a professor at John Jay College, and I'm very much committed to my students. And it's one of the reasons that I teach, you know, for the purpose of giving back, for inspiring, and for encouraging them to learn about the importance of their identity, the importance of purpose, and the importance of giving back. You know, that if you like yourself, then you like others. And if you see injustice of any kind, then you make sure that you step in to be helpful. You know, if you see any inequities or underserved communities, and you can lend a hand, that it's important that you do so.
You know, it's really fascinating, Ilyasah, when you talk about your mom instilling these values, you know, for you and your siblings. You know, being a wife of a very high profile person and always being in the public eye, like, how did your mother have time to do all of that? Is just really amazing. Can you speak to about, you know, some of those moments of family time? You know, give us just a glimpse of one memory that, you know, that your mom shared, you know, something very important with you that still lasts today.
Well, one thing that I know about my mother is she never accepted no as an answer for herself. You know, she never gave in to defeat or anything. You know, she continued to be inspired, and you know, she often said if she doesn't do it, she wasn't going to wait for someone else to do it, that it was her purpose, her mission to continue. And, you know, she was happy. She was very, very loving. I mean, I can't tell you how much unconditional love I got from my mother. And it's probably the reason why, you know, I have so much love for young people, or just people in general. More patience, more compassion, more care, you know, all of those things that I think are extremely important to ensure that our children develop for themselves.
So there were 5 of you. Where are you in the line of siblings? Are you the middle child? Are you?
Well, actually, I am the middle child. So my mother they had 6 daughters, and the last pregnancy were my twin sisters, and they were born after my father was gunned down. So my mother had 6 daughters, and I'm right smack in the middle.
How was it? How was it growing up as a middle child? Did that actually affect you, as some say being the middle child has its impact?
You know, I'm not really sure what it means to be the middle child, but what I can say is that I always just loved my mother so much. I looked at her, I admired her. I mean, I thought she was everything. And I think I ended up emulating who she was. So I was the big sister in my head to all of my sisters. I was the big sister in school to my friends. You know, I was like the big, you know, I was the big sister. But my older sisters, you know, may not say so, but I felt like I was always the big sister. My mother just inspired me tremendously. And, you know, I'm so grateful that one of the things that she did is she made sure that she kept our father's memory, his image, his personal items, his hat, his shoes, his briefcase, his books, as a part of our household. And so the conversations were consistent, so that we didn't grow up feeling, what they say, the effects of growing up in a single parent household, that we grew up understanding that our father didn't leave us and that our father loved us. And if we did something great, she would say, Daddy would be proud. If we did something that wasn't so great, she would say, your father would not approve. So, I look at her and just, in retrospect, and just marvel at this woman that she was, because, she was just in her late 20s. She saw her home was firebombed a week prior to her husband being gunned down. And, in spite of that, I never looked at my mother as a bitter person. She let me know that anything that you wanted in life, you had to work toward getting, and so she was just really such a role model for me and many, many others.
That's really awesome. I did not have the opportunity to meet your mother when she was still alive. However, I had a chance to see her speaking at an event, and she was just really incredible. And I think the thing that I really loved the most about her was she was this extraordinary woman, living an ordinary life. Like, she was a nurse and she was dedicated to her profession. She never let, her husband's, legacy, or, the history that he left, dictate who she was. And she was in her own right, her own person, doing some really, really amazing stuff. And, can you just give us, a time when you saw that up close and personal, that,
Yes, actually, my mother safeguarded her husband's legacy, because when we look at the images of people, sometimes often inaccurate, she helped me to understand the oneness of God, the oneness and, the brotherhood, the sisterhood of humanity, the brotherhood and that we're all brothers and sisters under the fatherhood of God. So she helped me understand this best. And when her husband's words and image were distorted, she made sure that she put him in proper context and safeguarded his legacy, not so he could shine, but for the benefit of future generations. And, when we look at the Malcolm and put him in context, we understand why there's so many young people now who are drawn to him. They're drawn to his model of righteousness, his model of pride, his, just so many great things about my father's work. And my mother had to make sure that she protected and guarded it for the benefit of future generations, so that the image that was drawn of him, young people understood that was inaccurate.
Yeah, for sure. That is something that we, even on a grand scale as an American Muslim community, when hearing something like that, we are all caught on, and feeling like we have to address that. Ilyasah, can you share with us a memory of your dad, of you and him, and an interaction that you had with him? Do you remember any?
Well, so I wasn't quite 3 years old. So, my memories that I used to think I had were likely the memories that my mother, continued to have in our conversations. And, like, I remembered a blue and white rocking chair. I remembered a beautiful doll. I remember his big teeth, because he would smile and he would say my name, Ilyasah, with such authority that I would stop in my tracks when my mother said I answered to no one. They could call me all day long and I would continue. I had a mind of my own, but when my father called me, I would stop in my tracks and give my attention to my father. My mother talked about how when my father would come home from being away, that I would always, since I was the youngest toddler, she also had my youngest sister who was an infant. but I was too walking, and my other sisters would be sleeping, and that I would be at the door, and he would grab me, and she would make these homemade cookies. We'd watch the news. He would have all these papers, and we would share these cookies that she would make. And she said when her husband was gunned down, she would take these cookies and put it on a plate at the door to pacify me. And that I would go to the door looking for my father, and I would never find him, but I would find a cookie in half. And I remember those cookies. And so I ended up getting this like addiction for cookies until I started getting older and realizing, of course, that, cookies aren't good for you unless they're, gluten-free, non-GMO. But what I'm so grateful for is that my mother kept memories of, really loving, endearing memories for each of her children, and so even my youngest sisters, the twins, you would never know if you talked to them that they never laid eyes on their father. So, I always look at my mother for, such, adoration, because she did take the time to make sure that her children had a proper, full opportunity to develop. And so that is, one of the things that drives my work, to make sure that other children have a good sense of who they are, that they recognize their value. I grew up understanding the significant contributions that people of the African diaspora made to the world, the significant contributions that women made to the world, and the significant contributions that Islam made to the world. So I grew up with a very healthy sense of who I am, and I understand my responsibility to make sure that we control the narrative, that we don't allow the narrative to be written by someone else. So, these are the kinds of things that I, in turn, pass on to my students.
Thank you, Ilyasah. We actually have one comment that was made by my dear sister, Salma, who said, so your dear mom was the great woman behind a great man. I just want to say, and I can't take credit for this, the wife of Mayor de Blasio, her name is Shirley McCrae. I used that phrase and she corrected me and she said, no. Now it's, beside every great man is a great woman.
Right.
And I really believe your mom was that kind of woman. Can you talk to us about her relationship with your dad? Like, she was, of course, his wife, but did she serve any other role? Like, I know, there are many wives who are very supportive of their husband's leadership, their advisors, their confidants. Can you give us a little bit of a glimpse of what you recall or what your mom shared with you in terms of what was her role in supporting his work?
Well, before, she said before her husband was gunned down, she believed her role was to make sure that the household was, and was an environment that was nurturing, that her role was to nourish and nurture the family. But after her husband was gunned down, because she was quite young, she was late 20s and she was pregnant with my twin sisters. And so that was a lot of babies. But when I was at the Schomburg, the part of the New York Public Library, reading some of the Malcolm X papers, I saw some cutouts. And there were cutouts that my father, news clippings that my father had and news clippings that my mother had. And my father's news clippings were of any types of violations against one's human rights anywhere around the world. So he was, he read everything. And my mother's clippings, they were, an educated woman is not arguing. Educated women want to have debates. They want to have discussions. And so I looked at it as there must have been a time when they would, my mother certainly was not the kind of woman that you can say, do something, and she was just going to be silent. She needed to understand why, she wanted reason. I know that my mother had great discussions with my father. He often spoke about, that women who are having relationships have to be, well-read, have these great conversations with your husband, have your place in society. He said that a society is measured by the progress of its women, and that, he supported when you educate a man, you educate a community, when you educate a woman, you raise a nation. So he saw the value and the purpose in women.
That's really awesome. So Ilyasah, tell us now about the work that you're doing. You have published several books. You wrote, an incredible amount about your father, but you continue to use, your parents' legacy and the work that you're doing. Talk to us about your books. I think you've now published 5 or 6, and you have one coming out in 2021. Tell us about your literary work.
Yeah, so my first book was Growing Up X, and it was just simply, it was right after my mother passed away, and I was going to do a book about my parents, but there were so many people who were really fascinated about how I grew up, how my sisters and I grew up, because they were misinformed about who Malcolm was, what Islam is. They were completely misinformed. And to find that there were so many similarities, and then there was so much fun, growing up with so many girls, and we were all very close in age, and the little tricks that we would play on our housekeeper, or the things that we would do, to our mother, just a lot of fun things, that we would go to camp in Vermont and sing these songs, and just so many really exciting stories in Growing Up X. But after that, I ended up doing a children's book about my father, and it promotes the importance of leadership, the importance of self-love. And from there, I did a young adult book, which was and it was much along the lines of my father, because people didn't understand that they were members of an organization in the 1930s that commanded millions of followers worldwide, and that his mother was the recording secretary for this organization, and his father was the president of this organization for the Garvey movement. And so that you had 2 well-rounded, educated, activist parents who would certainly make sure that their children are properly educated, nurtured, etc. And so it addressed the misinformation about my father, understanding that there's a role that your mother and father plays, and they must instill specific values of self-love, of literary, of responsibility, of accountability. And then I wrote a young adult book for college students, and it was primarily for young people who found themselves at a crossroads. And instead of going down one path, they see Malcolm's life story as an adolescent. But the story, the message in that story is, when young people find themselves at a crossroads, they don't say, I want to get a good education. They usually participate in something that is somewhat self-destructive. And so it says to older people, to the smart, forward-thinking adults, that we are responsible, and that we must, guide them and nurture them, regardless of whether we biologically birth them or not. And then I did Betty Before X. And Betty Before X is one of my favorite books, which I have, if you want me to read a little small excerpt.
Yeah, please do. Okay,
great, because I have it right here. Okay, and this is a middle school book, and it's about my mother's, it's for young children. It's about Betty. So I have 2 short excerpts. Tonight, I'm not asking God for anything. Tonight, I'm listening to the rainfall. I'm listening to the wind whistle. I'm listening to Shirley's breaths and to Jimmy's snores. I'm listening to Juanita's tossing and turning, and to the tick, tick, tick of the clock. I'm listening for Aunt Fannie Mae's laugh and Grandma Matilda's singing and the creak of the swing in the backyard that swayed under my favorite tree. I'm listening, no questions tonight, just listening and waiting and hoping that if I keep quiet just for this once, maybe God will speak to me, right? There's that, and then there's one more. And I think this is really good for young children to understand that even when they have, questions, that in their quiet time, they know that they can go to God, that they can, and have that relationship. Okay, May's blessings. I'm counting my blessings tonight. I'm thinking about Kay and how she never got to hear her mother's voice. I'm counting my blessings tonight. I'm thinking about all the ways love is a big deal. How it is the honey, lemon, and eucalyptus oil that Ollie Mae makes for a scratchy throat. The extra $1 Mr. Malloy gives me, telling me how hardworking I am. Love is talking to your sister on the telephone and running out of words to say, but staying on the line anyway. Love is not letting a friend stop being a friend for no good reason at all. Love is family being who you choose and who chooses you. So, my books are almost, it's letting the reader understand that they have purpose, that they have value, that they're worthy of love, that, the importance of God, the importance of giving back, the importance of life. But giving these messages in a novel form. And so mostly all of my books, except for my children's book, I've collaborated with various kinds of novelists. With one was Kim McLaren, excellent novelist. I wrote Growing Up X with her. For Malcolm Little, I did that on my own. For this Betty Before X, I did with Renee Watson. She's a New York Times bestseller, and Kekla Magoon. And my newest book, which is coming out in February, is with Tiffany Jackson. So I've been able to identify some really great people, experts in their fields, and make sure that we can create some really good quality books for young people.
That's really amazing. So tell us where we can find the current books that you have already published. Because some of our Concordians are actually parents of small children, as well as middle school age students, and then many are also aunts and uncles. Where can they find these books?
All of my books are online. I think if you
Amazon
Amazon. If you go to my website, you'll see, I think I have a list of all of the books that I've written, ilyasahshabazz.com. And also if you put Ilyasah Shabazz books, they'll all pop up.
Of all of your books so far that you've written, which is your favorite? That might be a difficult question to answer, but if there is one
I think I like Betty Before X. I think I really like that, but I'm looking forward to the next book that comes out, The Awakening of Malcolm X. But X a Novel has gotten a lot of awards from young teens, young teen categories. It's gotten a lot of awards. But all of my books, have gotten awards, but the X a Novel was one that really resonated. But Betty Before X is my favorite.
And can you tell us why that one is actually your favorite?
Well, it's my mother, and also it's about a young girl and her relationship with God, and whenever she has any question of self-doubt, that she always goes in her quiet time, and every time at night she talks to God, and then finally at the as she comes into her own, she ends up talking to God in the mornings and throughout the day.
So it's really interesting that the theme of all of your books are actually there's a religious undertone, but of course very public. Has anybody come out and said, well, are you trying to proselytize? Or, you know, I gather that, I haven't read your books, but I gather that, you know, they come from a place of universal, you know, love and connection to God, that regardless of what faith you're from, you
That's
can
right.
relate.
That's right. That is exactly right. Now, didn't you write a book? Did you publish a book?
I did. It's titled Leading While Muslim, and it's actually research-based. It's looking at the lived experiences of American Muslim school leaders in public education, and whether or not the political discourse, the global events, and the media coverage has impacted their leadership and spirituality. So I did also look at spirituality from a broader perspective, where it's not just about Muslims, but also looking at other faith traditions and how their faith actually drives their leadership and inspiration to serve. So definitely there is that connection. And yeah, so that's my book. I'm so impressed, and I'm so honored to hear of all the incredible work that you've been doing. And you know, I've been contemplating about doing another book, but the time and effort that it requires, I just don't know how you do it. You're teaching at John Jay Criminal Justice, you're doing international traveling and speaking. How do you make time to write? And when do you feel like you're the most creative in your writing?
Well, I'm most creative early in the morning. But I tell you, this quarantine, this pandemic, you know, as awful as it is, because we never want anyone to lose their lives for something that could have been, you know, we don't want to see anyone lose their loved ones. But it is also, you know, allowed for a time for us to go into ourselves, to listen to whatever it is around us, and to have, you know, new goals emerge with new ideas, goals, plans, a new self, hopefully. It's one of the things that I encourage with my students, because who knows when this will happen again. God willing, it won't ever happen again. But, you know, it is a time that I was able to sit back and really look at my life and look at the work that I have around me and be more attentive to it. Like the Shabazz Center, my father's birthday is coming up Tuesday, May 19th, and we're going to have a virtual celebration, a virtual program. So I'm looking forward to making that happen. And I'm sure, well, if I was traveling around, we would have had a physical celebration. But, you know, it's just given me an opportunity to really look more deeply at the work that we're doing and the things that are important, and how we can best serve our young people so that we have, you know, good things for our for the future, for future generations of youth.
That's really amazing. You know, there are people that I know that are actually journaling every day. And I was like, okay, should I, you know, just do a journal and write everything I'm doing every day? But then when I thought about it, I was like, it's, you know, Zoom call after Zoom call after Zoom call. Very boring still.
Right,
You know,
right.
But yeah, I mean, certainly the reflection time and the pause that it's given all of us, I think is really critical. And it really, you know, showed us that there is a higher power above us, and that we are fragile human beings. And it's certainly, you know, a wake-up call that we really need to ground ourselves in our spirituality, and find ourselves in, you know, our fellow brothers and sisters.
Right. The humanity, I think the humanity in each of us, no matter where we are in the world, it really connected us, you know, and it showed us that we need one another more than we don't. And,
yeah. And subhanAllah, you know, with today's technology, though we are isolated in our homes, look at us right now. We are on a platform that has people from all over the globe connecting and talking. Though we are not physically in each other's presence, this has been an incredible opportunity to learn and to share knowledge beyond, one could believe. So for the rest of our time, Ilyasah, I'm going to open it up for all of our participants to actually ask questions. I did check on the chat. I didn't see any questions. I'll check again. If anybody has any questions, just please chime in, unmute yourself, and ask a question.
I actually.
Any questions? Comments?
I have a question, Debbie.
Okay, great. Hey, Salma.
Assalamu alaikum, Debbie.
Wa alaikum assalam.
It's a wonderful conversation. I wanted to ask each of you, we were just talking about how this moment, this pause has, made you think about things differently, perhaps how you might want to engage with others differently moving forward, live your life differently, prioritize things in a different way. I wanted to ask each of you just to share a reflection. This is a project that I'm doing actually during this month of Ramadan. It's called 30 Days, 30 Reflections for Our Times, and asking people like yourselves just to inspire us with some of your reflections during this time, something personal that you have been thinking about, deliberating over, whatever that may be. I had the opportunity on a similar Zoom call that Concordia organized to ask Imam Suhaib Webb last Sunday. And there was a long conversation about Taraweeh and Jummah and all of the fiqh issues around how this is going to work. But in the conversation, he mentioned his one-year-old daughter. And towards the end of the call, I asked him, how are you going to explain this moment to your one-year-old daughter when she is old enough to understand? And his reflection, I think, was so beautiful. He didn't quite know how to answer that question, although he said he's been thinking about that a lot. But then he said, he's going to tell her that she is going to be so resilient, that she's going to slay, because she has, from birth, in fact, she when she was born, she was quite ill. Now she's living through a pandemic. She's been quarantined, like the ants in the Quran. That's going to make her so strong. And I thought that was such a beautiful, personal reflection. And I'd like to ask each of you to share something that's on your mind.
Ilyasah, why don't you go ahead as our guest?
Something that's on my mind. Well, I just realized that there were, let's see, how do I say this? Well, I can tell you, one of the things that, I think it might be a little personal, but I've been just looking at a lot of videos and work of my father's and just discovering that, there were some people who I may have thought were friends, and then I saw them in a different light. And so for me personally, I think I've been getting so much more clarity in my work, and I'm really grateful for the clarity, 100% clarity, that I never had before. And I'm grateful for that. I'm grateful to be able to, it's probably why I selected that excerpt in this book, that quiet moment where you can really hear what God is telling you, that you can see and hear better than you ever could before.
That's really awesome. Salma, for me, I would say that that one thing that's been heavily on my mind, and it's actually work related, but at the same time, it's not work related. I always, innately worry and care about other people, like we all do. So like right now, things that I'm dealing with, I'm a part of the Yemeni American community. We've had over 65 cases of COVID positive, and we've had close to a dozen deaths just within the bodega, small store business owners who basically are keeping New York running. because there was nowhere else to shop in food desert communities. And so when I started to see the pandemic affecting this community, I was like, we have to help these people. And so I launched the NYC Mask Mission campaign, which we've been able to raise a small amount of funds to actually help some of these folks. And we've been able to buy some masks and are going to be setting up these safety kits to start distributing with partnering organizations. And then as Ramadan was approaching, I was like, oh my God, there isn't enough halal food. And the food that was being provided by, New York City, that was widely publicized, was basically not, religiously sensitive to our community. And I was like, we need more halal food, and just pressuring them and prying them to get it done. And eventually last week, the mayor announced that they are now providing halal food, but it's a drop in the bucket. And so, this sense of feeling, like you have to fix things. And I think that one thing that I've learned about myself, that even though that we are living through a pandemic, and it is very dangerous, to be out there, I found other ways to continue doing my advocacy work. Just this past Friday and Saturday, yesterday and the day before, we also started doing food giveaway for Ramadan in Muslim neighborhoods that we knew that people desperately needed it. And it was really the first time that I was out there, of course, wearing my mask, wearing gloves. But it just, the thing that I've learned about myself is that you can't take the work out of me. And I'm somehow finding ways to continue doing it. And my sister said it best. One of the things that my sisters have been doing, each of us only has one daughter, so we've been doing these FaceTime, and they have to schedule the FaceTime with me. And my sister in the beginning said, even coronavirus couldn't shut you down. That we have to actually schedule a call with you. What is it with you? And I was like, I'm sorry, let's just do it at this time. So alhamdulillah, all I could say is I'm really grateful for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, being able to give each and every one of us, the skill set to do what we do to make the world a better place. So thank you for asking, Salma.
Well, thank you. Thank God for this quality that you have, because we are all the better for it. Our world is better for it. So Debbie, thank you.
Jazakallah.
Well, one thing for sure, we will all emerge as, different people. We will all emerge hopefully better than this before this happened.
Inshallah.
Inshallah. Other questions on the call?
Yes.
Assalamu alaikum. Can you hear me? Hi, how you doing, Sister Debbie? I have a question for Sister Ilyasah. I wanted to know, what class are you teaching at John Jay, and how has sort of your past informed what you teach and how you teach?
Well, I'm teaching perspectives on justice. And since this pandemic, the class has become so much more intimate. We've gotten so much closer. I love my students, and I think now they know that I do, because it's important, again, that they understand struggle, that they understand many things that they're discovering about their own selves, but also perspectives on justice, especially in the Africana world. From that perspective has been such a joy, because they're able to relate whatever is happening today to that continuation of activism, and then understanding their own, that they can't just exist in life, but that they have to continue to evolve, continue to study, continue to read, and make the world better than they found it.
All right, thank you.
Anyone else?
Other questions?
Yes. Salam alaikum, Ilyasah. Thanks, Debbie. You're awesome. Ilyasah, what would you tell your younger self about perseverance? Were there moments of confusion about your father's legacy, given how old you were? And, you know, I have 2 young girls and I have a son as well. And I'm just curious, like your books are fantastic and I can't wait for my children to get, you know, engaged in them. What would you advise the younger self?
Well, it's the reason that my students do presentations. I didn't have a voice in my younger self didn't have a voice. My younger self was concerned with, you know, others' expectations of me. And one of the things that I discovered is that all that matters is what God thinks of you, that we are not, no one can judge you. And so we waste time often when we're younger. We think about the peer pressure, what others expect of you, and not having your voice. When you don't know something in class, for example, that you must raise your hand and keep raising your hand until you absolutely understand, because we'll find as you get older that these are the things that are so much more important. So it's really validating myself and understanding when you look in the mirror at yourself, that reflection, you know, that you have to like it, and all that matters is what God thinks of you, and that's it. And that was a very tongue-twisted way of saying that.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Ilyasah, there is another question that came from Aisha, and she asked, how well have you and your siblings followed your parents, and especially your mother, in raising your own kids?
Well, because my mother did so much for 6, I mean, my gosh, she put us in summer camp with Quaker and Native American, you know, values every summer. She just did so many things: music, dance, history, tutor, Islam, everything that you can imagine. That it has been, neither of us has as many children that my mother has. And so it is still instilling similar values as my mother instilled in all 6 of us.
Really awesome. There was another question that was posted in the chat. This one is from Shiraz, and thank you for the talk. We've seen COVID bring communities together and solidarity in a way we may be haven't before. How do you think that we can continue these manifestations post-COVID and make sure that we use them to combat injustice long-term?
Well, I think we have to instill these values into our young people, right? Now we do have the opportunity to be on these Zoom chats, and there are a lot of young people who are on. We have the opportunity to engage more in social media. There are so many young people who are on, so it gives us an opportunity to be creative, you know, and to make sure that whatever our message is, and if our goal is to inspire and encourage our young, that we have the time to be creative to do so. And so that's one of the things that, you know, I'm grateful for, that I've been able to be more engaged.
Awesome. Any other questions from folks who are on the line?
Assalamu alaikum.
Go ahead.
Uh,
Sarah.
My name is Sarah Dani from Niagara Falls Cat, and I wrote a question in the chat,
Oh, I'm sorry.
but I'm not sure if you've seen it.
Probably missed it. My
I see
apologies.
them. I see 32 messages.
It's a question for Sister Ilyasah. It's real a privilege to hear you, and I'm so grateful for this opportunity and that it was organized by the Concordia Forum. Yesterday, alhamdulillah, we watched the film I Am Not Your Negro about James Baldwin, and he talked about Medgar Evers, Malcolm X, of course, and also Martin Luther King Jr. And it's so wonderful that I could see the living history today. What do you think of the film and his depiction of all the people? If you have any input or insight, I'd really appreciate it. And also your perspective as an author, because James Baldwin is was quite a prolific author.
You know, there's a quote that I often use that escapes me right now. You know, I might be loopy. Now I'm like, why am I so loopy? I'm loopy because I'm fasting. I enjoyed, I mean, the book I thought was excellent. You know, it definitely has a lot of scholarship. The film, I thought, I can't think of the gentleman's name who did it, but I thought he did an excellent job. James Baldwin. Oh gosh, there's a quote that I often use that I think is so relevant even today, but I can't think of it at the moment. So, but I will tell you that I love it. I love it. I think he did an excellent job with the film and of course his book. Lots of scholarship in it.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. It's a pleasure.
Other questions?
I see there are 33 questions there. I'm going to see if I can open them. Oh,
Yeah.
Last question.
Go ahead while we're looking through the chat. Someone said they have a question. Please ask it while we're looking through the chat.
What did James Baldwin say? Oh, I know what it was that he said. Instead of examining us, right? The people who are on the other end of oppression, the people who are on the other end of discrimination, instead of looking at us, let's look at you on the other end of who's doing the discriminating, who's doing the oppressing. And I thought that that was really genius because that's really what we all need. You know, there are 800 billion people in the world, and there's just a small percentage of people who aren't really good, but there's so many of us who are good. And so I think if we focused on, you know, being responsible and challenging those injustices, you know, creating, organizing, strategizing, that we can, you know, do better for our children. And so while watching many videos and listening to many things on the internet, there are a few people who are, thank goodness, who are trying to do that right now. So let's not focus on me. Let's focus on you and why it is important for you to do the things that you're doing. And with regards to Blacks in particular, why did you have to turn me into a slave, he said. Why did you have to turn me into a criminal? And so I just thought that that was really brilliant. And I loved the, his, you know, the way that he, I can't think of his name, but it'll probably come to me also. I loved how he put it in film because he made it, you know, it was very compelling information.
Thank you, Sarah, for the question. And I definitely have to catch the movie. Have plenty of time that night to watch movies now. Is there anyone else with a question? If not, then I'm going to ask Ilyasah just to, you know, say a few closing remarks, and I think our session will be over. Any other questions?
Well, listen, I think that now's the time that we reevaluate who we are. You know, what is our value system? What is important to us? And when this ban is lifted, that we go outside of our doors with, you know, a mission to give something back, to serve wholeheartedly, and to ensure that our children are properly cared for, protected, and have the opportunity to be educated and participate ultimately in mainstream society.
Awesome. All right. So everyone, join me to thank Ilyasah for joining us this afternoon. Thank you so much, Ilyasah, for honoring the request and coming to share your story, your family's legacy, and the incredible work that you are continuing to do to
Thank you
forge
very much. Thank you for allowing me to be
the
here.
next, the next generation of leaders, you know, in the Muslim community and you know, the world. So, Jazakallah khair.
Assalamu alaikum.
Well, thank you so much, Ilyasah and Debbie, for a very enlightening conversation. And thanks to all of you who joined us for not just this session, but the rest of the sessions that we had today in our 6-hour schedule, which will, inshallah, continue next week. Keep an eye on our Facebook page and our Twitter accounts for details on who will be joining us. And we wish you all a very blessed Ramadan and actually a very good evening, good afternoon, wherever you are.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Ramadan Mubarak.
Waalaikum salam.
Ramadan Mubarak, everyone.